our next to last session before the town hall, we have a glimpse into 3 programs at DSPO. It's my pleasure to invite Mr. Jorge Betancourt, Mr. Mike Olness, and Ms. Robin Brown to share updates with additive manufacturing standards, GuideUp, and DMSMS and parts management programs.
Well, good morning, everyone, and happy Friday Eve. Today, I'm going to walk you through the new AM standardization approach we're taking at the DSPO, and also give you a quick overview of AM readiness level. Okay, so this chart shows a historical on developing technologies. The one point that should be clear, I hope, is just how long it takes to develop new technologies. To develop a new technology, you need to understand the system right down to the material chemistry and structure, methods of manufacturing and suitability based on criticality, and so on. So stainless steel, for example, benefited from a very long developmental cycle, and it reaches back as you know, iron was developed and folks experimented and came up with stainless. Today, we leverage digital engineering to try and quickly and collaboratively meet the demands in this challenging time. Material data collection is an enabler, and that we combine via standards and data collection working teams to gain that edge. And we'll briefly discuss some of these techniques and data acquisition. 1952 is the start of DoD's holistic standardization approach. Okay, thanks. Title 10, U.S. Code, Chapter 145, 2451 through 57, institutionalized standardization. But the first AM machine didn't show up to the mid-'80s. It's stereolithography and called SLA, and it relies on photo polymerization process. Today, of course, we have a lot of different types of AM machines and approaches. So the one big takeaway, I think Ms. Baldwin nailed it. It's that we didn't get here by accident. We actually, the DoD and industry ponied up a lot of money, around, I would say, at least 18 billion, to stand up 13 MIIs, or manufacturing innovative institutes across the country. And these include America Makes, MXD, ARM, LIFT, and that's the ones I've been to, so I'm familiar with what they do. They do some really cool stuff. And Ms. Baldwin said that we're reaping big dividends from that investment. I agree. And we've also come a long way in engineering, just gone from draft tables and hard copies. They were king at one time. And now we focus on model-based systems engineering to provide that robust digital standard, and also to tag parts with that element of data collection to enable product re-engineering and redesign over the course of its life cycle. So We also have advanced manufacturing techniques. I heard Brian mention cold spray earlier. Army's big on cold spray. Um, there's also stir welding and meld which is um, manufactured out of Virginia. That that is being applied to a lot of aerospace type applications. So combined with digital advances, AM modernization um, is taking root, and it includes retooling the factory floor. So now we have some called Industry 4.0, and that takes in AI, the digital thread, digital twin, and you're actually able to make improvements on the factory floor without having to stop your line. So that's where we're heading. It's a really cool place to be. Got to witness that firsthand at the MXD, MII, and Deloitte and Siemens seem to be the front runners in that field. So, by the way, if you don't like this chart, I'll just fire the guy who put it together. Okay, so, and here's another one of those charts. But this one shows you how dramatic things have been over the last 10 to 12 years. We went from, in 2012, when we first started these MIIs, no digital thread. There was only one standard, and it was terminology for AM. And then we started gaining new machines. A lot of these machines were found in academia. And so take, for example, the Stratus Fortis 900. That's a polymeric machine. And, our organic industrial base started adopting all these. So that came on board early and was used for doing fit checks and the like on aviation parts. And then as we progressed, you see the EOS M290. It's a metal machine, and it only prints in the volume of a microwave oven. So it's really small, but GE used that particular powder bed fusion machine to develop their GE nozzle and got FAA certification in 2015. And that's when it was like the big bang. And all of a sudden, there was a lot of interest from across aerospace community. And now if you are in an aircraft, just know that you're relying on hundreds of AM manufactured parts. They're not all critical, but you are. So let me and also it's worth noting that in advanced manufacturing, you have direct energy, and I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. Deposition, they're large scale printers that are like giant welders, and they use those machines like SpaceX. When you see those big rocket engines and stages, those are printed with all these robots just going around printing. So really accelerates the manufacturing process. So that little thumbnail in the middle, that is the exponential growth. That's the exponential growth that's occurring in industry. It just stops at 2021, but it's really skyrocketing. So AM is really becoming part of our present day world. So ASTM put together a list of, I think it's 7 different processes, AM processes. And and it's part of one of their standards. So on the left is the SLA process. But and we talked about that a little bit, but if you move over towards a little bit towards the far or past middle right, you'll see the powder bed fusion. And that has a pretty cool example. That is a socket and ball used for hip replacements. Using powder bed fusion, they're able to create lattice structures in cup and cone, and it's titanium, and it enables the bone to join for a really good fit with the two cup and cones. So and in the middle, right to the left, you have binder jetting, and next to that you have material jetting. So binder jetting is pretty cool too. If you or somebody you know have taken a pill recently, it was probably binder jetted. And then also binder jetting is used for making large scale castings. And so it's pretty prevalent. There's a manufacturer that is kind of eating up the market because he's first to using binder jetting for sand castings. Anyway, and then on the far right, you have direct energy deposition. And again, that's almost like welding. It's almost like wire welding, but on a massive scale. And I already mentioned how SpaceX is using it, but also the railroads use it to repair their lines. And recently, the Air Force bought DED machines, and they're going to do the same thing. So we're all heading in this direction. There you go. So this is just a quick look at the basics. AM process, it's basically a CAD solid model, and you use a tessellation language, standard tessellation language, to create polygons, and then you send it to a slicer that creates a G code so that you can print one layer at a time. And so that's just a quick overview. So digital engineering strategy, AM, you can't do AM without the digital engineering approach. And you actually use digital engineering is transforming us from going from design, build, and test to model, analyze, and build. That is actually how you build AM anyway. So AM and DE have been running in parallel for a while, and it's a collaborative piece. You can use the models to have that discussion, and you can tweak models based on the need. A few of the things that are exploited for AM is model-based system engineering, digital twin and digital thread, and ICME, which is integrated computational metrology engineering, which is, again, it's for gathering data. And then the digital thread and the digital twin are used to make adjustments to the part to update it and to actually maintain robust data. I'll give you an example. The Air Force recently, they recently worked with DLA actually to get the F-110 engine totally digitally, um, you know, made up, right? So we have a digital twin, and and um, the intent is to put it on a new version of the F-15 um, EX Eagle, and what we're shooting for is getting 25% increase in performance out of that engine. So um, that's the kind of stuff we want to do with AM. So so first, I just want to thank Ms. Baldwin and Mr. Sims, um, because they, when we were at one of the MIIs recently, America Makes, they said, "Hey, there's obviously a big need for standards." Um, and so that came up in front of the DSC. I also want to thank DSC too. Um, and and the result was that we stood up a working group that's within the JAMWIG, which is the Joint Additive Manufacturing Working Group. And we already had our kickoff meeting in July, and had a follow-on meeting in August. We identified 182 standards that need adopting, and 77 of those are still in work. We're going to liaise with consortia to develop non-government standards, and I'll show you a different chart in a moment, where I can peel back down in a little. So, and we're also working with ANSI AMSC to identify any other gaps, and I'll talk to that in a moment too. So these are the level of efforts we are targeting, and below that there's stepping stones getting there. So we stood up the JAMWIG Standards Working Group, and we've checked off the first two. I found 4 non-government standards, or actually, I found 4 AM standards that we're going to look to adopt. And we also found some mil-spec that on cold spray that you know that we're actually going to tag, so it's part of our area. Right now, we're taking the approach of a standard area, and we're also going to, if you trail down that the stepping stones, the next stepping stone is to identify DoD LSAs, and so we can begin adopting standards. We have a population of 182 standards that I recently identified, and we're going to prioritize them, figure out which ones to tackle first and what to do. So that's where we're at right now. Eventually, we'll put it in assist, and we're looking to stand these up as digital standards. So, and then here's a chart. This is an America Makes chart identifying the 141 AM standards. They have a roadmap that has a gap analysis to it, and that's what we're going to use as a launch point. And you can see that we have ASTM, SAE, AWS, and DMSC. So, and we know, and actually, you know what? There should be AMSC should be there too. But but AWS is that's the American Welding Standards Institute, and DMSC is the Data Metrology Standards Committee. And what's really interesting about DMSC is they have a computational type model for metrology and other things called QIF with, and and it looks pretty promising. NavAir is piloting it, and that could be something that we use to gain some traction in AM, further traction. Okay, so I think we were talking earlier about qualification too, and this is a new approach to qualification. It's IQ, OQ, PQ, and this is it's used by the medical community, right? But NIAR, which is National Innovative Aero Aviation Research Center out in Wichita. They're the ones helping to develop it. They're taking the lead, but there's a similar thing to it used by the medical community. So I kind of say this is analogous to buying a barbecue and bringing it home. And if you're willing to build your barbecue, the first thing you do, like if you're an engineer, I think, and you're not too like if you're a little risk averse, you're going to look at the instructions. You're going to find all your parts. You're going to make sure the parts are in good conditions. That's a lot like installation qualification, and then start to assemble everything. Make sure you have the fit you need. And then the next piece is operational qualification, where, you want to probably with a barbecue, you got to heat it up to get rid of the preservatives and stuff, see how it runs, make sure that thermostat's calibrated, all that good stuff. So maybe a grill is probably harder than what we're doing, but anyway, so you go through that process, and then the next piece is the actual performance qualification, where you're trying to impress your friends or your spouse by cooking something up and trying it out for the first time, and you want to make sure it works and performs correctly. So this is like the first run, and it can be done pretty seamlessly. But the next step is when you launch it, say you put it in a battle damage repair Kanban that goes overseas. You've gotten through this process. So what happens next is that the rest of it's performance based, and it's machine agnostic. It's, powder supplier, software, parameters, build layout agnostic. And basically what you're doing is printing a part with a test coupon as part of that part. And then you're doing performance testing on the test coupon, and you have your part. So the trick here is to be prepared at the point of need when you need a part, and then also use AR, VR, and to translate that to the ESAs and the people responsible for giving you the thumbs up if you need to. And this is, in line with the Deputy Secretary Def it's one of their line of efforts. It's we need to speed up how we qualify things, especially if we're at the point of need. And then lastly, this is JAMA, which is sponsored by DLA, but it speaks to the entire community of practice. And these are the goals of that they set forth based on um, collaboration in the community of practice. So, and qualifications definitely high on the list. Data model sharing, education and workforce development. It's not good enough to just have really cool tools. Everybody has to know how to use them. Integration and alignment. And that's all I have. Are there any questions? Thank you.
I have a question
Oh,
from the webinar. One of your slides said there are many flyaway FAA approved parts, some with criticality. Where can we find a list of FAA parts that are currently being additively manufactured?
that's a great question. I think you have to reach out to the OEMs. Before, I'm a newbie here at the DSPO, but before I did this, I helped with point design, working with Boeing and other OEMs. And I'm not sure they're quick to, tell you what they have flying, but I do know that with 707 variants that we fly, right, like the KC-135 and other aircraft similar, um, they always try and pair up. We have this flying commercially. We proved it. How about we look at doing that? And so I don't have a way ahead there, but you know what? I might reach back to some of the OEMs that I've worked with and try and get that response to whoever's asking. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thanks.
All right, let's see if I can get through this without getting nailed for not talking loud enough. Going to start off with a question. How many here are familiar with GuideUp? How many here are members of GuideUp? It's not bad. So I guess I got to do the brief anyway. No, so truth in advertising, I'm the new guy here. I'm not Jim. So your eyes aren't deceiving you. So because I'm the new guy, I am going to read my cards occasionally to make sure that I'm not lying to you. The first thing I wanted to get into is just to let you know that a little bit of background about GuideUp. One of the things that I did when I first got onto the team was start reading, and I realized very quickly that everything that we're doing is interconnected, and everything that we have to do leads to the success of DoD and all of our partners. So you can't separate them from each other. The last thing that I wanted to point out, and this is very intimidating for the new guy, there's a lot of experience in this room. As I'm listening, I'm thinking, am I in the right room? No, but and anyway, this week we've heard a lot about the need for standards and what happens when those standards aren't, when those standards aren't followed. Almost as soon as DoD started establishing standards, they realized that we needed a way to collect them. We needed a way to share them. And that was kind of the impetus for GuideUp. In one form or another, since 1959, GuideUp has existed. And the reasons and the goals behind that is to promote and facilitate the sharing of technical data between the DoD and our industry partners. You see at the bottom, it says the goals, and there's always the lofty statement at the bottom of what your goals are, but that really truly means what we're trying to get at. And we could probably have a lengthy conversation about each and every one of these goals and how they apply to standards and standardization and the GuideUp umbrella entirely. But the way I look at it is, if we do about half of these right, the other half will follow along and trace. We just have to have the right intent, move forward with the right goals in mind, and the others will start to follow along, and we'll start to have our partners follow along as well. Okay, so guide up history. If you notice up there at the top, it says that GuideUp joined the DISPO team in 2007. And the first thing I thought of when I saw that number was, what took us so long? It seems to me that GuideUp's association with DISPO is a natural and complementary fit. In addition to me, there's some folks who work out in California, and unfortunately, I don't think any of them are here this week, or they may be online. And that's the Operations Center. The Operations Center works out of Naval Center Warfare, Corona. And to be fair, they're the ones who do all the heavy lifting. They're the ones who operate the GuideUp database and the website. And in fact, they're in the process of doing a tech refresh right now. And for those of you who are members, you've probably seen some of the changes to the website as you've been visiting over the past about 8 to 9 months. And then in addition to the Ops Center, we also have our government members. It's not just DoD, it's not just our industry partners, it's also Canada, it's also all the other departments within the US government. Right now, in fact, we're working with the Department of Energy to increase our sharing capabilities between ourselves. They're one of our primary sponsors, but we also want to make sure that they have access to the data in a way that is meaningful to them and allows them to continue to do their work in the easiest and speediest way that they can do it. The one thing I did want to point out, of course, the person who asked the question about the metric system, since we have Canada as a guest, as a partner, you will see a little bit of metric system in here. So you'll also see some confused faces, but you'll see some metric system. So at the bottom of I got to stop turning around. Anybody else have progressive lenses? Putting the screen down at the bottom of the room makes it really hard to see. So I'm going like this. So I'm not nodding off. Trust me, I can't see anything. So sorry. I like to have fun, and everybody's sort of so serious up here today. If you look at the timeline at the bottom, you'll notice that some of the dates are called out in color. Those dates apply to as our transition into online presence. I know everybody remembers the days of text-based email, text-based everything. And then as you progress along through the process, we started moving into the internet. Now, as we're moving forward, it's much more interconnected. And we've talked about it several times throughout the week that it's not just me looking at a computer, it's a computer pinging another computer, asking it for information, taking that information and doing something with it. So the box that's missing here is the 2024 and 2025 box, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So got to have the mandatory slide that talks about all the numbers and all the information that we have stored in there. The key thing to notice is there's just a huge amount of information. And I know everybody's bored, but in the next 36 slides or so, we'll go over each and every one of these in depth. Now, the reason I put this up here in all fairness is to point out the importance of our tech refresh for the website. Searching, everybody knows that searching the internet is a tedious process, especially if you're not 100% sure of what you're looking for. With the tech refresh, the interconnections among the information and the sources of data are much better linked, so that what you have is I don't want to use the wrong word. Fuzzy logic, I guess, is probably the best way to say it. If you sort of know what you're looking for, the interconnections of the documents and the submissions and the reports are better linked, so that when you do that, it pulls it up in a little bit better fashion. And again, we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, but this is the reason for the tech refresh. Also, I have to have the mandatory regulation and policy slide. Really, there's two primary things that regulate GuideUp policy. One is for the DoD. Obviously, we're a DoD entity. The other one is for all of our partners. We have all of the other government agencies. We have Canada. We have industry partners. So there has to be some real law and regulation behind it. The enforcement piece of that, we'll worry about that a little bit later. It's not an easy thing to enforce. You can say that you have to do this. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. So at any rate, the key thing about this is, and I mentioned it a second ago, is the FAR talks about shall. It's not a request, it's a requirement. You are required to, by law, look into and screen the GuideUp database for information that talks about counterfeits or any of the critical documentation that goes along with it, nonconformance, et cetera. And this gets into the reporting requirements. The reporting requirements, they're not that hard. They're the sort of things that you should do automatically, but how many people have been working on something and they come across an issue, they say a few choice words and then they go on with their life. At the end of the project, once they've wrapped everything up, you should go back and report, hey, I had a problem with whatever. But how many times have you not done that? Because you're busy and you move on with everything else. So one of the things that we've done is as part of the GuideUp site is kind of mandate feedback. If you pull information from the GuideUp site, you are requested to submit feedback against that, and it will continue to update that and make that part of the GuideUp system. Okay. DoD. This one's a little bit easier. This one we can mandate a little bit more. But I really don't want to focus on the mandates. I want to talk more about the fact that it's a collecting and exchanging of information problem. It's how do we get it? How do we get people to provide us this information? How do we make it available to everybody else? And that's really the focus of the GuideUp membership and the organization itself is making sure that everyone here is aware of it. I'm going to transpose two different meetings. This one and Robin's meetings last week, we talked about notifications. Notifications were an extremely important concern for everybody in the audience, both here and in some of the discussions I've had this week. How do you find out about it? Well, you need to make it available in a way that's easy to search. So let me see, make sure I'm not missing anything here. Okay. Their hands must get really tired. All right. So what you're looking here, for anybody who's read the SD25, this is a graphic that comes straight out of the SD25, and it speaks well to the whole process and the whole focus of what GuideUp is doing. Everything revolves around the common good. Everything we're trying to do is built off of the idea that we want to make the systems better. We want to do things in a way that allows us to share that information, improve our processes, and improve our output to either the warfighter or the various systems that we're supporting in the other government agencies in Canada, et cetera. So that the key thing that you'll see here is that everything points inward. And how you get to the pointing inward is good communication and good relationships. Everybody this week has talked about how they want to make sure that they're involved in certain working groups. They want to be involved in certain developments. That only comes from good relationships, and that's what one of the things that we focus on is making sure that we're connected to all the people in the right places, and we build the relationships so that when we see a problem or when somebody else sees a problem, it gets back to us. Again, I was part of a conversation last week where somebody said, "Hey, I found something on the internet." And I looked in a different database, Assist, and it wasn't listed. Well, why is that? Well, it's not a perfect system, but because of those relationships, because people know that, hey, that should really be in there, that gets communicated back to DISPO or it gets communicated back to us, and we go out and do the research and we make that part of our system, and then we make it available to everybody else. So again, it's focused on the common good and it's focused on the common framework, but it's all built around good relationships. Okay, I'm not going to talk about all these. I just wanted to give you sort of an overview of all the areas that we touched. This is the data types that the GuideUp database focuses on, and I'm sure this isn't all of them. It's a good spread of them, and it covers a lot of wide areas, but it doesn't. I mean, it's not all inclusive, I'm sure. I don't want to change yet. There's one gentleman at the back reading very carefully. Sorry, like I said, I like to have fun when I'm standing up here, so I'll tease a few people if I can. All right. I mentioned the Operations Center earlier, and really I want to spend the next couple of slides talking about them. Their focus right now is a technology refresh. They're rebuilding the website to be much more user-friendly and more modern and streamlined so that it doesn't require Mike Olness to go out there, type into the keyboard and say, what am I looking for? It allows interconnections between other computer systems and other frameworks, and they can pull information based off of better searches, better connections, and better information. So I'll start at the top left. The information comes from 3 different sources. It comes from Mind. They screen scrape and do all sorts of things to pull it out of the internet, similar to, like I said, they found something on the internet, wasn't part of the system, they'll bring that in. It also comes from members and non-member submissions. When somebody sees a problem, they go into the GuideUp system and they can report it right there within the website. Once they do that, it goes into that bottom box. That bottom box is kind of the process flow for what happens after you say, hey, I saw a problem. Well, somebody looks at it and evaluates your submission, looks over it to figure out if it's complete, and does a little bit more research to make sure that what they determine from that submission is a complete report, and it offers our GuideUp members and users to go in there and make a decision and understand what it is that they're looking at, and whether or not they have an exception or whether or not they have a counterfeit or whatever the case may be. The key thing that I want to talk about on the top right, the data outputs, there's 2 things that have been really improved with our tech refresh. And they're the bottom 2, the batch match and the XML. In the past, you would have to have an exact match. You would have to have exactly what you're looking for and list them out, and you could do a request for a batch of anything that matched that. Now it's a little bit more fluid. Now it's a little bit more based on it's close enough. Did you spell it with a capital? Did you spell it with lowercase? Did you misspell it? Did you abbreviate it? Doesn't matter. Now it's a little bit more all-inclusive, so that when you put in a batch match request, it's going to give you much better data output. And the XML, we've talked about XML throughout the week, so I won't belabor that one. So what have we seen? What have we seen from the improvements to our GuideUp database? I have to point out the top left. As you notice, the years, it gets more and more, and the number of part numbers in the database keep going up and up. And what happened in 2024? Well, what happened in 2024 was this brief came 3 weeks before the data dump for 2024. So those numbers are probably in line with 2023, and actually, based on the conversations that I've had with the folks at the Ops Center, it looks to be moving ahead of where we were in 2023, which is what we hope for. We want to see continued and increased usage over time. What I do want to point out, though, is the one on the bottom left. The one on the bottom left is not a mistake. The one on the bottom left is actually showing the results of the enhanced batch match and XML database capabilities. Because now you can go in and you can do a refined and streamlined search. You get just the data that you're looking for. So you don't have to download thousands and thousands of documents. You do a much more refined search, and you get a much more refined result. And therefore, the haystack that you have to look through is far smaller, and it's enabled people to move a lot faster. So that is one of the benefits that we've seen so far, and we expect that number to continue to stay quite low throughout the rest of the year. And again, I can't see. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything, and I can't see those letters with these glasses. Oh yeah, hey, look at that. All right, just a few more metrics, and then we'll move on away from this. As you notice, there's a few more that really matter. The non-conformance reported. That's one of the ones that we're doing some research into. We're trying to make sure that we understand that is non-conformance going down or is reporting going down. And that's one of the problems that I mentioned earlier is everybody reporting what they need to report? Well, we think so, but we have to do the legwork to make sure. All right. Now we get into the eye charts. I won't read this to you. This is kind of our progression of what we used to have to where we're going to be. And on the far right, the Tech Refresh version 2, we've already made lots of progress. I mean, version 1's already done. It's out there. You can see it. As we move into version 2, there's a lot of things in various stages. One of the key things that I want to point out is we went from kind of an in-house hosting to a government cloud. The government cloud enables certain things that we couldn't do before, like CAC enablement. You can have CUI information hosted on it, so we can improve our data sources and we can improve our data repository by moving over to a new cloud. And really, the key things that are holding that up is if you look at the ones that in blue, they're waiting on the ATO. Anybody ever waited on an ATO within the government? Months, years, who knows? Well, it's actually moved quite quickly, and we expect that it'll be done soon, but I won't give you a date because I won't put myself in the position of making a bad guess or lying to you. So, all right. I'll just give you a chance to look at that just briefly. I did mention that if you look at the batch match, the third grouping down on the far right, relating documents through related parts. That's a huge improvement. That is a huge capability boost. So that where you used to have individual parts and individual pieces, now you have a part related to a weapon system or a complete product. And that makes it much easier. If you're searching for guide-up reports on a system instead of a part, it'll pull up all the subparts that are associated with that system that have reports on them. So that covers you a little bit more completely in terms of information flow to you. Let me see. Come on. I broke it. I'm going to stop and see if it catches up. Come on. Any day now. Yep. Nope. I went too far. All right. Of course, this dies right when I need to. That's a building slide so that I need to push it like 6 times. So we'll see if this works. Okay. So this talks about the website, and I'll go through this quickly, but it does build, and it shows the difference between, it used to be an on-premise thing, and I don't want to say cobbled together, but it really was. It wasn't as efficient and streamlined as it once was. That's what it used to look like. That's what we look like now. As we, come on. Menus and things like that look like the 1990s. Now they look at least a little bit more refreshed. Okay. Good. So some of the things that we've gotten rid of, eventually we're going to get to a point where all we're offering is XML and roster searches. Now, we're still not there yet. So as we continue to refresh this, as we continue to build on this, you'll see updates on an ongoing basis. This is one of those things where there's release 1, and then 6 months later it's release 2. It's incremental. Every time you come to the website, you're likely to see something a little bit new, and we try to point those out on the website. So again, I'm honestly pushing the button as fast as I can. I swear. All right. So everybody freeze. Nobody move any further. Okay. The kind of the last things that I wanted to talk about is where we're at and where we're going. We've talked about all the standards and how they all fit together, and in fact, Robin and I were talking earlier that we're kind of a unique item within the standardization office. We're not really standardization pieces, but we're instrumental in making sure that the standardization part works. So, thing that I'll leave you with is, if I haven't met you this week, please help me get to know you, and help me get to know how I can help you, and help me build a relationship. Like I said earlier, that's really where we're focusing. So, and with that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I do have a question from the webinar. Who or where can we go to ensure that when developing or reviewing data item descriptions, we are in compliance with GuideUp requirements?
I killed it. The easiest way to do that is simply go to the guideup.org website. On there, there's a number of well, there's actually a help guide for one, but there's also a number of resources in there that will help get you either to me or to the operations center team, and we can all answer your questions. Any information you're looking for, as I said, if you're a member of GuideUp, you should be able to find most of that on there. But if you don't want to look for it, or you find it, or you don't find what you're looking for, please let us know, because that's what we're here for. Is we're here to help people find the information that they're looking for. Yes, sir.
Sorry, yes, this is Jim DeCamp with Boeing St. Louis. I've utilized GuideUp for many years, and I love the tool. It's really quick and rapid, and I've used quite a bit the urgent data request feature to get the community, information on parts and data. And I noticed that in your version 2, you said you're going to somehow change that, or is that to be increased, or is that modified, or how is that being changed in the future?
It's actually going to be simplified. It's not going away at all. I should have mentioned that when I was talking, but one of the key things that we've learned over time is the urgent data requests are one of the key functions that people come in there and are looking for. How they're doing it is they're actually making so that you can feed data into it, much like the batch. Oh, my brain just shut off. Thank you. Match. You'd think I'd be able to remember that. It's 2 easy words. Much like the batch match, it'll be able to take a group of document requests and process them for you. So that's how it's going to be improved. It's actually going to be streamlined.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, thank you.
So I'm going to do things a little bit different. I'm actually going to go and walk around. So I don't have to turn back. I don't have to worry about the mic. Matt, I'll have you flip my slides for me. All right. So my name is Robin Brown. I've been around for a really long time. It's almost 25 years that I have been in the world of DMSMS, diminishing manufacturing sources and material shortages. If I said that and you're looking at me like I have 2 heads, also known as obsolescence. And I'm also program manager for the Defense Standardization Program Office for parts management. Now, remember when I say parts management, it's part selection. It's selecting your parts more wisely in design and redesign. It's not anything more than that. And I think that a lot of people are confused when I say the words parts management. They think it's inventory, spares, DLA stuff. I think I confuse them even more since I have a DLA email. So I can totally understand why people think that. I put the invisible woman here. My team just recently gave me that title. I am the enemy of Dr. Doom, which is Dr. DMSMS. So here I am in this slide trying to avoid all these problems from happening for the program offices. Also was the DMSMS lead at NavAir for 4 years. I was able to hang out with the cool kids back then. So I'm happy to be able to say that I was able to support all 35 program offices at NavAir. Next slide. So we've been hustling the last few years. So in 2000, November of 2020, we were able to publish our first DODI on DMSMS management. We had a 40 plus year gap where we didn't have any policy, any guidance that really was directing anybody to do DMSMS management. We did have a sentence in the DOD, the regulation 4140 that said material managers needed to manage DMSMS, but With that said, it was only the material managers that would read that document. So we didn't have the engineering folks on board, the logistics folks, the program management folks. So we sat down. It took us about 2 years to come up with all the roles and responsibilities, not only for what the program offices are now required to do, but also what the OSD organizations are required to do as well. Which is really cool because now people know what their roles and responsibilities are. So there's a lot less finger pointing. That's your job. That's my job. I'm not supposed to do that. Another thing that's super cool about me working actually at DISPO, which is an organization that falls under research and engineering, is my champion is actually an A&S sustainment. So I have a foot in both worlds, which constantly confuses people as well. But it's very rare, I think, in my opinion, to have another organization that you don't work for to be a champion for what you do. But that's been a blessing in disguise because, as we all know, in order to manage DMSMS proactively, you need the acquisition support, the sustainment folks, you need research and engineering, you need program management to be on board. Then a couple years later, I actually, to be honest with you, sat on the manual for a couple of years because I didn't want to try to get them both published at the same time. I took baby steps. But with that said, as soon as the instruction got published, we started formally coordinating our manual. And then we got that published in 2022. So I like to say that my instruction is an outline of what the roles and responsibilities are for each organization, the program offices. The manual is the Reader's Digest version, the procedures that go along with those requirements. And we've had actually the SD22, which is our Bible. And actually has been, the processes have been adopted by 13 different countries around the world. France is actually translating the SD22 into French to be able to use it there. So we've had, even though it says March of 2024 for SD22, that thing was actually written in 2006. So we've had that around for a really long time. So the manual is the Reader's Digest version of the SD22. And then, as you can see, it's the size of a small phone book, which I'm dating myself because our phone book's obsolete now. Not sure. And then, in addition to that, we published the SD26, which I'm also responsible for. And that is DMSMS. It used to be only DMSMS contract language guide, but in 2023, we also added some parts management contract language to that guide. In addition to having examples of contract language that you can use throughout the life cycle, you also have examples of DIDs and seed roles for both DMSMS and parts management in that SD26. Next slide. And they saved me for last, by the way, not because I'm the best or somebody hates me. It's because I talk a lot. And I think Michael was worried that I would monopolize the whole time. So I'm on to you. How many people here are familiar with DMSMS management? Is this, okay. All right, so we do have a process that I mentioned in SD22. It has, there's different steps. You see my pyramid there and a gold circle around the pyramid. So in order to do a risk-based proactive DMSMS management, you need to prepare your program. You need to identify, who your team's going to be, what tools are you going to use. You need to gather your bills of materials, load them into predictive tools. So that you can identify, assess, analyze, mitigate, and implement the resolutions that you find. A couple years ago, I added the gold strategized ring around the pyramid. That's my hook to parts management, to be honest with you. So if you look at the new SD22 update, the last couple of updates, we introduced Strategize as a new key term. What that really means is building DMSMS resilient designs. I'm trying to get the government to have more oversight in the parts that industry selects for us, and also early in design and redesign, ensure that you're trying to build your designs in ways that you may not encounter DMSMS issues, or if you do encounter DMSMS issues, you're able to resolve them more quickly. Next slide. So in my instruction now, I mentioned we hadn't had one of these for over 40 years. I still kind of feel like I'm a school teacher teaching the same subject to different students over and over and over. But now I have something to say, you have to do it. Before I didn't. I just had to get their buy-in and get them to see, why this was definitely valuable for them to do. But basically what it says is the services need to have an organization within each service that has a DMSMS lead. They need to ensure that all of their training, their policy, their guidance documents consider DMSMS. They need to communicate with their supply organizations and ensure that there's feedback back and forth between the two. And then for the program offices, every program office for every part, every system, even COTS, software, materials, chemicals, everything, need to have a DMSMS management plan. They need to maintain all of that data. They need to evaluate designs. Again, my hook, right, to parts management and ensuring that we're picking our parts more wisely in design. Program and budget, not only for their team and their tool, but they're for their resolutions as well. Put those contract language examples, put those that contract language into contracts. Make sure that you evaluate DMSMS when you do your independent logistics assessments, your systems engineering tech reviews. Again, communicate back and forth with the supply organizations like DLA, NAVSUP, and train their workforce. Next slide. So I'm not a big fan either of saying you got to do it because there's an instruction. So these next 3 slides, I'm going to go over quickly. But these are the 3 slides that I have used for the past 25 years to prove to program offices the value of doing DMSMS management. So this first slide really helped me to get those, 25 out of 35 NAVAIR program offices on board within a year. If you load your bills of materials into these predictive tools that we have, you're able to forecast 3 to 5 years in advance when things are going to go obsolete. So this it buys you more time, and it increases your window of opportunity to make a more cost-effective decision. So instead of going to buy a part and you can't buy it because of obsolescence issues, you're able to, have a forward look. And when you do that, and you're able to get more cost-effective decisions, or, the cost of the solutions decrease, and then also you avoid a lot of out-of-cycle redesigns in doing that. Next slide. So this is the proof of the avoiding out-of-cycle redesigns. So this is an Army example. I did a record-keeping webinar. By the way, we had a guide-up webinar just a few weeks ago. It was recorded. So we've actually been doing webinars for a couple of years now on different topics if you guys are interested in learning more. But during my record-keeping webinar, I asked the program offices, the services, to give me some data. So this is an Army example. They resolved over 8,000 cases, and 99.3% of those cases were resolved without a redesign. So a lot of people think in the obsolescence world that the only option you have in a lot of cases is redesign or a lifetime buy or an end-of-need buy. And this is proof that that's not the case if you do this proactively and you're able to pick those more cost-effective decisions. Another thing that I failed to mention up front is everything that you see on these slides, I created with the services. So everything I do, we wrote together, the instruction, the manual, SD 22, 26. I'm also responsible for SD 19, SD 18. We all write that together. Everything that we do is in lockstep, that I do is in lockstep with the services. Next slide. Oh, I'm talking fast. So the other thing that really helps in selling DMSMS management program offices is this. So if you keep your records and you load those predictive tools and you see your cases, across your cards, your boxes, your systems, it really helps you to prepare and justify DMSMS budgets. And that's really the only way that you're going to do it is, if you're able to look at where you're going to have issues and do an operational impact assessment, that really helps to not only get money for your team and your tool, but this helps to get funding for resolutions. And I was talking to somebody earlier yesterday, Tuesday or today, we were talking about how program offices, I'm seeing a shift in program offices being successful in programming and budgeting for the resolutions. So there's a lot more out there that are doing that now, especially since the instruction was put into place and it says that it's a requirement that you do that. Next slide. So are you still not convinced? Well, next slide. We are working on, I have a new strategic objective project that just started. I'm actually been doing this for so long that I'm getting tired of hearing myself speak. So I hope you're not either. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get more creative. So I have a new strategic objective project. We're going to try to rebrand this. We're going to try to figure out, what are the key things that leadership cares about. How do we tie DMSMS to readiness? How do we show that we can positively impact or help with back orders? So we're looking at ways to gather all of those slides and presentations that people give to leadership to put together really a standardized format for those templates to be able to help. Because I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I just did an assessment of the state of DMSMS management across DoD. And one of the things that we've uncovered, we're still doing our analysis, is that there's still lack of leadership buy-in in a lot of areas, a lot of program offices, to be able to manage this proactively and get the resources that's needed to do it. Next slide. So there. I just talked about the assessment. So I did go out. I did formal coordination actually with the help of A&S sustainment, Dr. LaPlante at his level. And I was able to get them to agree to do it. However, I thought I was going to get over 700 program offices responses, but the services, for a lot of reasons, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but they decided to go ahead and pick and choose which program offices would respond. They didn't require, even though that's what was required, for all of the program offices to respond. So instead of getting about 700 program offices responses, I got 150. But I like to say let's fail forward. So what we're doing right now is we're analyzing those 150 that we've received to see what we can glean from them. Have two different reasons for doing the analysis, even though we haven't received all the program offices responses. One thing is trying to glean from it, what challenges we still face, how can we be more efficient. Really, in doing this assessment, it was never the intention to get anybody in trouble, or it was really for us to get a better understanding of where people are at. Oftentimes, I find that we get rewarded for putting out fires and not doing our day-to-day activities. So I wanted to gain a better understanding of which and how many program offices across DoD are actually doing this proactively and doing a good job. And in addition to that, wanted to figure out which program offices aren't and really gain a better understanding as to why they aren't, so that I can help them to be able to be successful and get on board and do this. What else did I want to say about that? So the next slide are all the questions, and I won't go over it, but I did put it in the slide deck. So we basically asked them, you know, how familiar are you with policy? Do you have a plan? Is it an approved plan? Do you have a team? What's the makeup of your team? I was trying to get information that really answers to questions that leadership has been asking me for years that I haven't been able to answer. I love being a cheerleader and a champion for this, and I always brag about what my team does and how many program offices are managing DMSMS proactively. But it's like what I think the DEPSO panel talked about. Without the information to back you up, it decreases your credibility. So if I go out to you guys, I said, yeah, you know, DoD program offices are awesome. And the next question they ask me is, well, how many program offices are managing DMSMS? I'm like, well, I'm not sure. Or what's the magnitude of how much money is being spent on DMSMS management across DoD? I don't know. How much money are you spending on resolutions? I'm not sure. What's the resolution trends across DoD? I don't know. I mean, you know, I think you guys, you know, get where I'm going. I remember when I was an ILA assessor at NavAir, the same thing would happen. I would assess the DMSMS program. Man, we have a great program. And I'd be like, they're like, we're having industry do it for us. We're having our contractor do it. And I would ask, well, what tool are you using? And they would say, well, I'm not sure. How are you doing it? What's the process? So I know for certain, because I have a DMSMS lead for each service, that program offices are doing the work and they're doing a great job, but I'm trying to get that information to be able to back me up. So far, we're still discovering after all these years that funding is still an issue. Program offices are still having issues with programming and budgeting. Program offices are still having issues with leadership buy-in. Program offices still need more training. So those are things that we're going to hone in on and try to either beef up our policy, beef up our, you know, our guidance, or our training in a lot of different ways. One of the things that I'm already thinking of doing is, because I had such poor cooperation in getting all the program offices to respond, I'm pretty certain I'm going to be putting an annual reporting requirement in my instruction when we update the DODI. Another issue that we discovered is in DODI, we don't say who needs to approve the DMSMS plan. In my mind, and it used to actually say in the DoD 4140 that it's the program manager's responsibility. It doesn't say that anywhere anymore. So we're getting a lot of, it's not my responsibility, a lot of finger pointing. So I need to add that back into our instruction as well. Next slide. Switching gears to my other hat, which is parts management. I already mentioned part selection, ensuring that we pick our parts more wisely. You know, parts management really improves system outcomes, and it really impacts what we do in design and redesigns. Really impacts what happens in sustainment and even in production. So I won't read all of this due to lack of time, but you see that if you do better part selection, it really enables all of those things on the right. Next slide. So with that said, when I updated my SD19 not too long ago, we changed it. So SD19 Parts Management Guide used to be more focused on industries parts management programs. Now SD19 is focused on government parts management programs. So in my future here, and that'll be the next slide, I'm actually, and you can go there, with the services, and I have parts management lead for each service. Next slide. We've written a parts management DODI. So we don't have this. So basically, what this parts management policy states, and again, I wrote it with the services, we're almost going to start informal coordination in R&E due to the fact that this is more of a systems engineering function. And so basically what this DODI will say is every program office in DOD will have to have a parts management program. And that parts management program, if you go back to the previous slide, is going to be required to have oversight in the parts that industry selects for us. And if you read SD 19, it gives you a different levels of oversight depending based on the criticality of the parts or the requirements that your system has. So you could do like MDA, right? It's actually modeled after some of the MDA PMAP process management processes that they have. So you could have total parts control, which that's not what I'm saying. I don't want to go back there. But if your system is critical enough and you need that, we have some advice and some recommendations that you can use to do that. But then the other aspect of it, and then you could have the less laissez-faire approach like we have. What we discovered in doing an assessment on better part selection is a lot of program offices have thrown it over the fence to industry to pick our parts with little oversight. So there's a middle ground there. So let's say you put MIL standard 11991, which we've talked about, on contract, and you're good to go. You have industry write a parts management plan. You review the plan and you feel as though they've got a really good plan and a really good process. And then you put MIL standard or another standard that's similar on contract. If they meet the requirements of that standard, you're good. But if they don't, in SD 26 and also SD 19, we've created something called an exception report, where industry would write up the exception report and let the government know that they can't meet a requirement and why. And then we would have a conversation and we can negotiate and try to figure out what the solution would be together. Next slide. Next. So in addition to that, I like to have fun too. I need to actually put Tuesday's pictures up there because that was the year before for the awards. But we give out awards. I do have a working group. We meet with my government team every month. I meet with my government and industry team on a quarterly basis. Some of it's in person, some of it is virtual. I have a lot of support from DAU. We actually have our own credential, parts and material life cycle management credential. It's 13 classes, about 40 hours worth of work. We do monthly webinar series I've mentioned for the last couple of years. I already have a plan from the feedback from the last couple of years to do a whole other year in 2025. DAU also maintains 2 knowledge sharing portals for us, the parts management knowledge sharing portal and the DMSMS management. I have some conferences here today. I'm also part of the International Institute for Obsolescence Management. So they're having a conference in Williamsburg in October. I skipped a year because of that conference because there was a lot of synergy there. So I'm actually supporting that conference this year. And then in August of 2025, mark your calendars, we will have another DMSMS and parts management conference in Florida. And next slide. Another strategic objective project that we're working on, we're trying to wrap our brains around foreign military sales and how we can work with our foreign military sales partners within the program offices better, because there's a lot of synergy there, a lot of resources, a lot of opportunities, I think, that are missed. So we're doing a deeper dive into that. I want to ensure that our policies and processes and best practices are consistent with the international standards. So I work with my counterparts from Germany with, in England, in France on a regular basis. So we're collaborating and we're trying to we're actually updating the IEC 6402, which is a DMSMS management standard, which the US has adopted. It's aligned, almost perfectly aligned with SD22 here in the US. And then a lot of them have universities that they have PhD students and graduate students that want to work on different projects for DMSMS management. So we're identifying those research opportunities. We're suggesting approaches for different collaborations for that as well. And I'll continue to support the International Institute for Obsolescence Management. Next slide. So how can you help? Help your program offices follow policy and guidance and really adhere to these best practices. For my service DMSMS leads, I'm asking them to help me plan strategically with the results that we get from the assessment. What do we do in 3 years? A plan for the next 3 years, the next 5 years. We are always updating our policy, our guidance documents. So if you have any recommendations, I'm always open to considering those. If you have any ideas on developing strategic communications templates or how to help me build better international DMSMS management relationships, please try to get your program offices now to follow that new parts management paradigm. And ensuring that we're picking our parts more wisely, especially since we need visibility in our supply chain at this point, and not wanting our parts to come from our adversaries. Let's leverage the influence of technology refresh and budgets, and participate in the DAU webinar series, and we'll continue working with our international partners. And I'd love your support at the conference next year. Next slide. So how can I help you guys? Any questions?
So what with coming out of more or less COVID and all of the supply chain disruptions that happened with that, what kinds of lessons have we taken in DMSMS management and parts management, policy and practice, and use of Defense Production Act and similar?
Yeah, it's difficult, but so I do work with the Industrial Base Policy Office pretty closely. We've had them brief numerous resources that we may be able to use. We have used, their resources to be able to tackle our issues. But the problem is, and I'll be honest with you guys, is we are so stovepiped that it's still hard for us to figure out what we need because we don't know what we have across the board. And so that's been a really big struggle because no matter what we go after, I've also had industry come to me often throughout the years. I got this great capability, I can really help. Or even ask the question, how can I help? And it's been really hard for us to be able to figure out what are our true top issues, to be able to answer those questions and ensure that there's enough demand, because we have such low demand, to give, folks or even people with resources like that, a return on investment. So that's the way the future actually is. We're really, really working hard with the supply chain risk management folks, with that in the enterprise parts management system we're building, to be able to have visibility into our supply chain so that we can look for cross-cutting issues across DoD at our level and try to solve some of those problems, because right now we're not. It's really decentralized. We're leaving it. I know for the DMSMS world, it's almost impossible for me to figure out, if we have an issue, I've got to query 12 different systems right now, or, 4, 6 different people to be able to find the answer. And even the answer that they give us isn't 100% answer, because I suspect we have about 50% of our bills and materials at this point. So I don't know if that answered your question, but we're moving in that direction. But it's hard for us to know what we need when we don't know what we have yet. So we really need industry to help us with that also. Any other questions? I'm not looking at Michael because I know I'm over my time. Yes.
So quick question, Bruce Burnside, NAVC. From a program office, who should I fund to run the DMS MS database, the prime contractor or a government entity?
You know what's funny is I don't care. You could run either. I'm jokingly saying that, but it doesn't matter to me. And we're not, prescribing that, as long as it's the program manager's responsibility to ensure that DMS/MS management is being done in a risk-based, proactive way. You could have your prime do it as long as you have the oversight and you know what they're doing. You have that open, honest communication. You get timely notifications. You have visibility into their systems. Or you can have the government do it also, or both. I mean, in a lot of cases, I see both, because you need that independent third, like almost like a health insurance, somebody verifying and validating what, industry or what those tools are telling you, because that's really only a starting point. You need somebody to be able to verify and validate what's coming out of those tools. So.
Right. So that was kind of the argument. There's arguments both ways.
Mhm.
So the solution we ended up with is we did both.
Mhm.
And then the government contract entity had a totally different tool than the prime contractor, and trying to interface those two. And
Right.
it
Yeah.
didn't seem like the best solution.
Yeah. What's interesting is throughout the years when I was over at NAVAIR, actually did some research, and this is true. 80% of the time when industry would come to us and say our only option is to redesign, we'd find a simpler solution. That got us thinking that maybe we need to get smarter. And that's when we started verifying and validating. But I think we've come a long way. I feel as though industry now is doing that work also. They know we got smarter. So, I'm not saying that they were trying to pull the wool over our eyes, but I feel like in many cases it's because they weren't managing DMS/MS proactively, and you really needed to have that independent, third party. Another thing that's helping is a lot of real time, digital engineering, these systems that we have where we can actually get timely notifications, industry and the government at the same time. Instead of waiting for somebody to, send that notification to us. So that's helping as well. So. Next question.
Yes, I noticed that, many of us in the DMS/MS community, we've always zeroed in for the last 20, 30 years on diminishing manufacturing sources.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really killing us in industry now is the material shortages. And we realize that there's not, any real large databases tracking the various chemicals, the various materials that are going out. And it's really doing a number on production, trying to come up with second sources, trying to come up with a way to track it. And I'm wondering, a lot of us are coming up with, in-house ways to try to put databases together, but I think some of the commercial tools are going down that path. A bit Smart is doing that now. But I'm wondering, is there any directives coming out for non-electrical obsolescence management that really zeroes in on this? Because it seems to be a real void there.
Yeah, I think a lot of the DMS/MS case management tools are adding things that are non-electronic, and figuring out, we still have some work to do in figuring out the algorithms and where to pull data. A lot of that is manual. So you have to build relationships with your manufacturers to be able to get that information. But with the enterprise parts management system, that's been identified as a gap in DoD. And it is one of the requirements for EPMS to add ways to forecast things that are non-electronic, and even COTS, is a big, that's really hard for us to kind of wrap our brains around as well. But right now, the best that we can do is work with the A&S material and chemicals lead. They have some systems that we can also query and then try to pull that all together at some point. We're still very much stovepiped. But I think we're all headed in the same direction. So I think that's definitely positive. Yeah.
When a OEM decides to in production of a part, how successful are we at obtaining the rights to reproduce it ourselves?
It depends. I've seen us be successful in some cases and us not be successful in others. I never really did the deep dive to figure out why that is for the ones that aren't successful. But I definitely would leverage off of the best practices of those that are, and kind of I feel like I'm a cat herder sometimes. So like connecting people together and trying to learn from each other as to how we can go about doing that.
Yeah, the only reason I ask is, as we get better with AM and stuff, it's like we really could. And so it's like the last chance for us to get those data rights or whatever, or the patent, all that good stuff.
Yeah, we
and
have
the
to
last
put
chance for
that
them
up
to get money
front.
out of us, right?
Yeah, I think contract language is super important. Putting the right language on contract to be able to get that information up front if we can. That's why I always say treat a redesign as a new acquisition. It gives you the opportunity to do things maybe you should have done or didn't know to do, in design that you can fix and redesign. So. Any other questions or thoughts, comments? All right.
All right, thank you.